Hello and welcome to the micro presentation on engaging students. This presentation specifically deals with engaging students through the lens of personalization. My name is Jacob Spradlin. I'm the Associate Director for Instructional Technology Support Services and Faculty Development at SHSU Online, and I'll be your guide today. So let's go ahead and get to it, shall we? Today our agenda will be focused on a number of things. Student engagement, we'll talk about it, maybe put a little bit of a definition around it. We'll look at placing ourselves as instructors in the course and then allowing our students to place themselves in the course. We'll talk a little bit about personalized learning, how you can personalize without confusion, providing appropriate feedback and when you should do that. Finally, we'll look at the tools of engagement when it comes to engaging students in personalization. So that's our agenda today. So if you're ready, we'll move forward. So, student engagement. You can see the definition there on the screen. My favorite part of this slide is the quote from Benjamin Franklin, and I really think it resonates for most of us out there. The tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So the important part there is getting students engaged. If we can involve them in the process, then the more active and the more inspired and the more committed to the learning process they'll be. So if that definition that you see from the Glossary of Education Reform, if that definition is true, then there are many ways an online instructor can impact the attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion of students. This particular presentation deals with how personalizing an online course can increase student engagement. When an online instructor and students can invest more of themselves in an online course, the satisfaction levels reported by those same students will go up. So let's start with the instructor. Let's start with us, right? Placing ourselves in the course. Well, what does that do for us? Well, essentially, students in an online course, they like to feel like they know who you are. A text-based introductory paragraph or a post in a getting to know you discussion forum may not fully encompass who you are to the student. Those students may feel almost like they're in an aseptic environment where you're just some creature that inputs grades and responds a la textual message to how they're doing in their course. So it's important that you let the students get to know you. And you can do this a couple different ways, right? You can provide pictures in your course, a picture of yourself. If you're not comfortable with a picture of yourself, maybe you use an avatar that suits you. Something that represents maybe your credo to teaching or a humorous aspect about yourself, something that personalizes you to your students. Then I would recommend that you do what we're doing right here and now, and that's using the video medium to introduce yourself. So a short introductory video that you can use our studio at SHSU Online with our crew who do a wonderful job and introduce yourself. It doesn't have to be long. 2 to 3 minutes even is a great way just to introduce yourself. Possibly one of the most important things you can do as an online instructor is to have a virtual office. Now, a virtual office does a number of things, but I'm going to take a step back and talk to you about maybe what you've done in your face-to-face courses. In a face-to-face course, if a student were to raise their hand and ask a question, everybody in that course benefits from that question because they hear it. In the online environment, if a student drafts an email to you asking a question, the other students in the course don't get that added benefit. So what we suggest that you do is create a place where students can ask questions online. But the virtual office is a little bit more than that. And I'm going to jump over to a representation of this virtual office. And this is actually in our org that we'll be talking about in the course of our cohort in our time together. But the virtual office it's a place, it's your office. It's your office as it would be almost on campus, as a student would come in or come by. The student knows who you are. They get a picture of who you are. They get an idea of where you are, how to get in touch with you. Some faculty members will put their office number. Others might even put their cell. I'm going to leave that up to your discretion. A Skype address or a Twitter account might be good there. But then a little bit about yourself, why you love doing what you do. You're a person with real wants and needs and desires around teaching and learning. So try to communicate those. Then maybe include a couple of fun facts about yourself that the students may or may not know. Beyond that, you then have the part where we look at the virtual discussion forum, right? A place where you as an instructor can answer questions that students submit to you. We've already talked a little bit about why that's important. One of the benefits is that, hey, all the students get access to this particular virtual office. Beyond that, across a semester, you're going to get many questions. From these questions that come in, you can build an FAQ for future sessions of your course or versions of your course where students can get, before they even start, some of those questions answered without even having to essentially ask them. So that's a good reason to have that virtual office discussion forum. Then, as the instructor, your best practice in having this discussion forum is to go ahead and subscribe to it, meaning when a student makes a post in the virtual office, you'll get an email notification that says, hey, student so-and-so has made a post in the virtual office. And that engages you to want to get into your course and answer them. You'll notice, and we talk about this in our communications section of our cohort time together, is that provide an expectation around what the turnaround is on answering these questions. You'll see here in this example that we say that answers to questions will be posted within 24 hours of receipt on business days. Essentially what that means is if they were to answer the question, on a Monday, you'd get to it by Tuesday at the same time. Weekends are yours alone. However, that expectation you make and you set. So you determine what those boundaries are for your course, but you're upfront with it so your students know about it. Beyond that, another great thing to have in your virtual office is maybe some virtual office hours. So in this tool, and we might talk a little bit about this in the cohort, as we utilize Blackboard Collaborate, where the students can have a live synchronous chat, video conference, or just audio conference with you about things that they're going through in their course. And we schedule those, and they're always available at those times. So the neat thing about that is you can schedule them while you're at your normal office, and then for those students who may work different times, you may have an evening time, 30 minutes where you've got your laptop next to you on the couch. And the Blackboard Collaborate software will notify you when someone enters the room, and you can talk with them in a synchronous way. So that's another important feature that you can have in your virtual office. Finally, one of those underreported or underappreciated sections in your virtual office is a way for your online students to maybe get in touch with your department or the program that they're involved in. Because, hey, you may not have all the answers. The advisor might need to step in, or they need to maybe find social media for the department. They want to know what the department Facebook page is, or what's the phone number for the department admin. You can provide this right there in the virtual office. But what all of this does for you is it personalizes you to your students. Finally, the last thing that we'll talk about, and we do this for you and your students in terms of placing yourself in the course, is that we ask that you go ahead and update your profile in the university. And what I mean by that is when you log into Blackboard, up at the top of the screen is the global navigation menu. And you'll notice that for many of you, there will be a gray icon like a head with a torso on it, just a gray oval or a circle. In this case, I've replaced that with a caricature of myself, but you could use another picture. But to go in there and provide that little icon of yourself does a couple of things. First, what it does is you set up this profile about yourself, and when you go through to set up your profile, it'll ask you, you can do some questions around if you're employed at the university or you're a student at the university. And we can work with your ID to set that up. But the important thing here is by having this profile picture, every time you interact with your students in the course, a picture is associated with it. So when you respond to a discussion post, when you grade an item, when you add a comment on a blog or a wiki, your picture is there, thereby personalizing that interaction. So that's having yourself placed in the course. Let's talk about your students, right? Possibly, in an online course, it's easy for students to believe that they operate in a vacuum, right? They punch their ticket, they fulfill their obligation, and they never get a good look at who is on this learning journey with them. So you can see that allowing students to place themselves in your online course begins to build a community almost, a learning community that encourages students to be successfully engaged. So why not have your student find a way to place their image in your course? Have them attach, upload, insert their picture as part of an introductory activity. Maybe even do an introductory video themselves, right? Have them go through the steps in the social profile that you can find in that Teaching Online with Blackboard organization that every student and faculty member is, or the student orientation course. You're enrolled in the Teaching Online with Blackboard course, but the students are enrolled in the Blackboard Student Orientation org, and they have on the Get Connected section, it tells them how to do all these things. So after the profile is created for the student, their face appears when they turn in work. So you see their face as you're grading their work, thereby personalizing that interaction for you. But student photos, student videos, have them do a PowerPoint presentation like we're doing right now with a voiceover that introduces themselves to you, investing themselves in the course. So beyond allowing students and yourself to be placed in the course, let's talk a little bit about personalizing the learning that's taking place in the course, right? How can I make the activities that they do, the readings that they're involved in mean more to them? So we know that student satisfaction goes up. The research says that it goes up when they feel, the students, that they have skin in the game when it comes to the learning experience. So the challenge for many online instructors is figuring out how to incorporate student content building or student contributions to the online environment. Here are a few strategies in that regard. Now, I will say this, and I say this all the time when it comes to adding things in your online course or adopting a new strategy or methodology, and that is, you don't have to do all these things. Find one that works for you, stick with it until it works great, and then move on to the next thing. So let's start talking about the first thing here. This is called a KWL assignment. And what a KWL stands for is, what do you know, what do you want to know, and what have you learned? So at the beginning of the semester, you have your students fill out an assignment. Maybe it's a discussion assignment, maybe it's just a document that they submit to you with essentially what do they know about the subject matter in the course, and what do they want to know about the subject matter of the course. The neat thing is you can look over those, and I would submit to you that in the midst of looking over what they want to know more about, odds are many of the things that they want to know more about, you're going to be touching on anyway. So you can use those moments where a student says, hey, I'd like to know more about this, when you're introducing a lecture, and be like, hey, many of you in your KWL assignment stated that you really wanted to know more about this. Well, good news, we're talking about this week. And so you're personalizing the learning for them by saying, hey, you know that stuff that you're interested in? Well, we're going to talk about it. And that gives them that little bit of, oh, wow, the instructor is kind of interested in what I want to know more about. This is really for me. It's not just some survey that I'm involved in. So it's those kinds of things. And then on the tail end, the last assignment of the course, you have them come in and write what they've learned. So they visually get to look at what they wanted to know more about, what they knew about, and then what they learned throughout the course. And it connects it all for them. So that's one instance. Another is a reflection activity. And this here on the screen, it says weekly. For some of you, that may be too much. It might be you do, monthly, depending upon. But having a student use a journal tool in Blackboard to reflect over the things that happened for them in the course that week or that period during that topic. Maybe it's at the end of a unit where they reflect on the unit. What was the best thing they learned during the process of working through the unit? What was the most challenging thing about that? Then you as the instructor can go back and look at these, and by putting them in the journal, you let your students know, hey, this is only between you and me. It's not shared with the rest of your colleagues, so you don't need to worry about that. But what it does for you is it provides a way for you possibly to formatively change some things in your course. If you notice some trend lines happening, if you notice some students struggling with a particular topic, you might go find, let's say you're in a math course and they're having an issue with a particular math problem. You might invest some resources from the Khan Academy in your course to help them deal with that, because maybe the way that the text or the publisher content you might have brought into the course didn't quite get to it the way you wanted it to. Or you might just write up your own solution and record it and put it there. But having them be able to reflect about how they've done that week and what they've processed can help you make the course better for them and make those course corrections long before it's idea survey time. Then here's one that we talk about in the course, and it's kind of interesting, especially when we look generally. It's kind of interesting when we look generationally at what students think about academic integrity. We live in a society when a student wants to know something, they just pick up their phone and Google it, right? Or they look for it on the web and they can find the answer. Oh, who was the person that starred in that movie? Oh yeah, that was The Rock, or whatever. And they know the answer right then. So when they come into this environment, they may not quite understand the academic integrity as you know it. So a good idea is to have a discussion early on where you maybe talk to the students about your academic integrity policy and then have them define in their mind what academic integrity is, right? And you discuss, maybe you have a guided discussion around what that is for you in your course. And this is really good for those entry-level courses in a program, or maybe these students haven't been in college in a while, but where they start talking about academic integrity. And this helps you, and it helps them in the long run think critically around their assignments and citing and making sure to follow copyright rules and all those things. So just another one of those things you can wiggle into your course. Then I would submit to you that the study guide assignment, it's a tried and true one, right? Where you have the students maybe work on a wiki activity where you give them, all right, students, there are going to be 10 questions in the course that you're going to come up with for our final assessment or our midterm or this particular assessment. I want you guys to come up with these questions and answers. And so you give them the power in that situation to test or assess themselves. And so a little more buy-in might be involved there. Finally, the ability for them to evaluate each other, in a sense, is something that you can bring into a course. Now, I will say that this works in different ways, and peer evaluation means different things. So for instance, it could be that you do a survey of your students if they've worked in a group, and you have them rank each other anonymously around how they did, and you incorporate that as part of your final grade. Another way to do peer evaluation is to have them evaluate each other's work. Maybe you utilize a wiki where they build out a case study, and then you, as your group members, have to actually contribute to each other and say, hey, you know what, I like what you did here, but you missed out on this subject or this particular idea. Or you can use another tool that we have on campus to maybe have them peer evaluate each other's papers. There are any number of those kinds of ways that you have the students interact that might be workable for you. I'm not saying that they will be, but they might be. So we're talking about personalization, and we're talking about all of these great ways that we can engage your students in your courses, but it's important that we don't go crazy, right? I'm reminded of my first time I taught as an adjunct, and I decided I was going to throw every bell and whistle in that course, because I was super excited. Well, I heard about it in my evaluations. I had too much going on. So let's start by talking about personalization without confusion. So the main thing here is to keep the main thing the main thing. And what does that mean? If the personalization or engagement does not comport to the learning objectives, then don't do it, right? If it doesn't follow along with what you're trying, your stated goal and your syllabi and your unit level objectives is, then it's not worth it. I think of it as like the second lifeification of education, where there was a time period where everybody wanted to do something in Second Life. Well, unless it comported to a certain real thing, maybe you're doing role playing, maybe something along those lines, that might be a place where Second Life would be good. But having a meeting in Second Life, I could have a meeting in a webinar that serves the same purpose, is less of a hindrance, and I don't have people flying around as squirrels or furry animals in the middle of my meeting. So the second thing I talk about is my version of the KISS principle, right? Keep it simply single. Add one new wrinkle to your experience at a time. Don't heighten student anxiety by adding lots of tools or technology that they've never seen before. Try one thing, and then when they're comfortable with that, they've got a rhythm with that, then layer in the next thing. Don't give them, in an online environment when you're learning, it's already going to be a little anxious. There's already some anxiety there, right? So by keeping the amount of the stuff that they're trying to process down a little, you reduce that. Finally, for this slide, don't play hide and seek with course content. If you started out putting content and activities in a certain order, stick with it. Don't make them hunt and peck or try to find where something is. Don't put the rigor in the navigation. Put the rigor in the actual content. Another way that you can personalize and keep out confusion here are a couple. So use images to introduce content and topics, and then break the monotony of the text monopoly. And that's hard to say, but it's true, right? The more ways I can turn on a light in my student's brain, maybe get them out of the doldrums of I'm reading this again, I'm reading, oh wait, there's an image, there's a shiny object that kind of grabs my attention for a second that deals with what I'm doing. So that's kind of nice. Then keeping the routine. So while keeping the same routine or order of a unit of study, utilize different activities to differentiate the way the students interact with the course. What I mean there is maybe you don't do a discussion every single week, right? That's hard on you, but it's also hard on your students. So find a way to have a different type of activity. Maybe it's a reflection activity. Maybe it's a collaboration activity, but have them, if you have them in the same order, you can use different tools. Then lastly, change up how you deliver content to students. Introduce a discussion activity a la webcam recording, or provide an audio introduction with assignment instructions that contain bonus points for those who listen. Putting those little Easter eggs in there, making sure, hey, if you've heard this entire thing, you get an extra 1 point if you answer this question or do this thing in my course. So that's kind of fun. Probably the most important way to ensure your students believe that you are personally involved in their learning is to provide prompt and frequent feedback. Think about how you feel when someone gives you kudos on a job well done, or even coaching on a subject where you might need assistance. You feel like someone took a personal interest in something that you were doing, right? So, students feel the same way about the feedback you provide via the course. So, some strategies, pick any one or one of these, don't try to do everything again. Make it part of your daily routine. Think about as you do for your writing, for your research, right? They tell us when writing to just knock out a time during the day, whether it be 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and just do that. So maybe during the week, you maybe, in the morning, you first get to work, right before you get to work, that's your time. That's your time to provide feedback. Whatever time that is, make it a regular, routinely thing that you do. Change how feedback is provided. You don't always have to stick with text. You can provide audio or video feedback. I was in a graduate course in the spring, and a professor provided a YouTube video for feedback for our group assignment, where he addressed all of us who participated in that group assignment via a YouTube video. And he embedded that in our feedback in the Grade Center. That was amazing. I was personalized. He called out our names individually, and I was looking at him as he was talking about the assignment that we submitted. That's more than just a great job, guys, text that you see there. One thing I will add to this particular slide, just as a small caveat, consider having a feedback rubric, meaning you've got a document that you can use where you put commonly used phrases for the types of assignments. And then all you need to do is type in their first name and paste in kind of what you want to say from your feedback rubric. So that's kind of a neat little side post, if you will. Next, regular communication is key. So a weekly announcement. Some people do this more, some people do it less. Find the rhythm that works for you and your students. But the great thing about the weekly announcement is you can use it to sum up what they've learned and then to have them look ahead to what's going to happen next. So you're crystallizing for them the stuff that they talked about that week, and then you're pointing them towards the content that they should be focusing on for the next. The students feel like you're engaged, that you're reaching out, that you're not just every once in a while putting your toes in the pool to check and make sure the temperature is good. You're in there with them, you're on this journey with them, and that's something that they appreciate. Now, for those of you that use discussions, here's a biggie. I hear this as a complaint from faculty a lot when I talk about discussions with them. They feel like they have to reply all the time, and it's just time-consuming, tiresome, those wonderful words. So, what are some things that you can do to make that a little easier on yourself, but at the same time, make it engaging for your students? Talk to your students, let them know that you will be doing summary posts in discussion forums. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't reply to students individually when someone really tickles your fancy, but what it does do is it lets you to kind of absorb everything that happened in that discussion and then write your own post at the end titled Summary Post. And here you talk about the discussion that they had as a whole, right? You get a holistic look at this, right? And you say, hey, you know what? I really liked what Susan, Jeff, and Jorge said about this particular topic. I think it really spoke to what the chapter and the reading said, but you also then connected it to things that were going on with you and your careers and your life. And then you can also go beyond just the, the calling out kudos, is you can do challenges and be focused on things like, well, when we talked about the fundamentals of this particular concept, I think we lost sight of A. And then you can kind of refocus them and get them in there. But you're only doing that in one spot. So what that does is it makes your feedback more efficient and effective. So the next thing I would say is schedule office hours. This is a definite one that students, even if they don't utilize it, the idea that you offer it makes them feel more connected to you. And I showed you this in the virtual office. Find a way to be synchronous with your students. And it doesn't have to be using Collaborate. If you use Skype, you can just say, hey, here's my Skype. I'm going to have this Skype available from here to here. Some faculty members actually have a separate Skype than their normal one. So they've got a Professor so-and-so Skype or a Dr. so-and-so account that they use for their office hours. Or it might be just, a chat, whatever, however that works for you. Providing an area for your students to interact with you in real time in that online course, there is value there. So, lastly, before we wrap it up, we're going to talk about the tools of engagement. I know that's a play on words, and that's, if you know me, I am pun-centric. So anyway, the tools of engagement are really important allies in your desire to be engaging and to engage your students and have them engage with your online course. So the first one I would talk about, and we talk about this in the cohort too, is the app. One of the first activities that I would make sure that your students do is to download the Blackboard app and log into your course. Take a screenshot of them logged into your course via the app and submit it as part of an assignment in a discussion or what have you. The reason we say that is because Blackboard automatically uses the app to communicate to your students, right? So when a grade is posted, when a discussion is replied to, when a due date is coming up, their app will buzz in their pocket on their phone. And these little devices, these phones, and I'm holding mine now, you can't see it right now, but I have notifications on mine that drive my day, just like your students do the same. So why not use a tool that they're already invested in to communicate with them? And that leads us straight into notifications. Let your students know about notifications, how they can control them, control the flow of them. Some students may not want to see every time you add new content to the course. There's a place they can go to check that. But I would highly suggest that you make sure that they keep certain items checked, so they know what's going on. So in terms of the tools of engagement, due dates. Putting due dates on your assignments will notify students a week ahead of time to let them know that they need to turn it in, right? So that's important. Beyond that, even if they're late, it'll let them know that too. But due dates, engage them. Their phone goes off. They'll get an email. It'll say, oh my gosh, you've got this thing coming up. It prompts them to go back in and do something in your course. Then we'll talk about the carrot and the stick, right? Extra credit, and then finding ways to say, hey, you know what? If you don't meet this discussion deadline, you lose these points. So providing those types of things, like embedding Easter eggs in your content that they can find, or opportunities for them to do a little extra, will engage some students. For those students that's important to, they're going to jump on it. Some students are not. They're just going to do what they need to do. Some students need the stick by saying, hey, your first post is due here, your replies on these posts is due here. If you don't get your replies, that you get half credit for the discussion, and make that a large enough thing where it affects their performance in the class. Then the performance dashboard. The performance dashboard is a tool in your course that will allow you to see when a student has logged in last. So you'd be like, oh, well, this student hasn't paid attention to this particular course, so he hasn't been here in a week. I can then reach out to that student and be like, hey, I noticed you haven't logged in a week. Is everything okay? What's going on? That kind of a thing. Lastly, Blackboard offers reports. And I'm going to jump very quickly over to Blackboard, just so you can see where these things are in your courses, right? So it's important to know that. So if I were just to open up any course in Blackboard, and just so we know that we're all there, I'm opening up our master template course that you guys all got assigned in the cohort, just so you can see it. But if I scroll down to my control panel and go to evaluation, there are course reports. From this course reports section, I can find, oh my gosh, the nuggets of data that will help me understand where my students are spending the time in the course. So if I notice that a student's grades aren't doing well enough, and then I notice also they're not spending time in the content of the course, there might be a connection I can draw, right? Or their activity, or their overall activity in discussions, their overall activity in all the tools in the course. These reports provide you with the data that will drive your decisions and your students' decisions in terms of how you communicate with them. So those are all important kinds of tools of engagement. So we've come to the end. These 6 methods of personalization, the online learning environment, they don't have to all be done at once, right? As with most of the best practices in this presentation, we encourage you to take it one step at a time. Remember, if you feel overwhelmed, then odds are your students will too, right? Because they're just like you. Hopefully, you will find your students paying more attention, being more curious, showing more interest, and bubbling over with optimism and being passionate about their learning. So, I look forward to talking about this with you in the cohort. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks a lot.